In this video, we're going to take a look at solving quadratic equations with the quadratic formula. And this is a third in our review videos. So the first one we looked at was the square root method, where we can use when you have no x term, works real nice, and or in this case no y term. And then sometimes we have, in order to use the square root method, we've got to come first. So if we complete the square first, then in the end we end up using the square root method. Nice thing about completing the square is that it always works, no matter what. Well, if completing the square always works, then if we take a generic equation like ax squared plus bx plus c, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, if we could solve this using completing the square, we could get a perfect equation, perfect formula. And it turns out that formula is the quadratic equation. So if ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then it turns out that our solution is x equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So this is our magic formula. We call it the quadratic formula, and this will always find our solutions if it's in standard form. So here we have an equation in standard form. The number in the a spot is 1, the number in the b spot is 8, the number in the c spot is negative 2. And so we just plug that into our quadratic formula. X equals negative b, which is 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 8 squared, minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. And that cleans up to this, negative 8 plus or minus. Be careful if you're going to make mistakes using the quadratic formula. It almost always happens in here, so you got to be careful. I'm going to go ahead and take a couple steps here. Let's make this 64, and then we've got, I'm going to think of this as negative 4 times 1 times negative 2. That's going to be a positive 8. Or if you want to think of it differently, it's minus negative 8. Same story. And so we end up with negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 72 all over 2. Now remember, you can't just divide this 8 and this 2, because this 2 divides both terms on top. And so we have to simplify the square root of 72. And so our square root of 72, we look for a perfect square that goes into 72. And we know 9 does. Keep going though, 36 also does. And so this is a square root of 36 times 2. And just a quick review here, we have the square root of 72 is the square root of 36 times the square root of 2. We know the square root of 36 is 6, and the square root of 2 we leave alone. So we're going to rewrite the square root of 72 as 6 square root of 2 all over 2. And now this 2 can divide both terms. And so we end up with negative 8 divided by 2, which gives us negative 4. And the 6 divided by 2 gives us 3. Okay, and there's our solution. Actually, this is our solutions plural, because this is 2 answers. X equals negative 4 plus 3 square root of 2, which is a decimal number you can figure out, or x is negative 4 minus 3 square root of 2. That or now doesn't mean pick whatever you like. It means it's both of them, and just can't be the same thing at the same time, or 2 different things at the same time. So anyways, there's how we use the quadratic formula. Let's try another one. Alright, in this case we have 3x plus 4 equals 4x squared, and before we use the quadratic formula we've got to put it into standard form by subtracting 4x squared from both sides. Alright, and subtracting 4x squared is going to give us negative 4x squared plus 3x plus 4. We want to put it in descending order, which is standard form there. And now we know what our a term is. We've got an a term of negative 4. We've got a b term of 3 and a c term of 4. Alright, so that means we have x equals negative b, which is 3, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is negative 4, times c, which is positive 4, all kinds of 4s, all over 2a. Alright, so we have negative 3 plus or minus. Again, be careful on the inside. This is 9. Alright, we've got 4 times 4 is 16 times 4 is 64. So we got 9, and the minus times the minus is going to be plus. Let's go ahead and write that down so we don't make a silly mistake. All over negative 8. Okay? And so we have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 73 all over negative 8. Okay? Now the only thing we can do here, we can't simplify the square root of 73 because that's prime, is we can divide everything by negative 1. And so negative divided by negative just makes a positive, and this is a plus divided by negative and a minus divided by negative. It doesn't change much. Okay? So we end up with x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 73 all over 8. There's our solutions. Remember, the plus or minus means we have two answers. 3 plus square root of 73 divided by 8, and 3 minus the square root of 73 divided by 8. Two answers. Last one here. Again, we want to put in standard form first. So since we have 2x squared over this side, let's subtract and add all these things over here to bring them on over here. So if we end up with, subtract x squared from both sides, and we're going to end up with x squared. If we add 2x and add 2x, we're going to end up with negative 4x. And let's subtract 6 and subtract 6. This can give us a negative 32. Now we're all ready for the quadratic formula. X equals negative b, which in this case is b is negative 4, plus or minus the square root of b squared, and negative 4 is in the b spot, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 32, all over 2 times a, and the a value is 1. Alright, x equals 4 plus or minus, we got 4 squared is 16, minus, we got negative 4 times a negative 32, that's going to be 128, times 1, it's going to be positive, all over 2, and so that's 4 plus or minus 16 plus 128 should give us 144. And that one's kind of nice. We know the square root of 144. That is 12. So we have 4 plus or minus 12 all over 2. Now, over here, we couldn't do anything with this, so we left it alone. This just represents a big decimal number. But in this case, we can. We've got two answers. We've got x equals 4 plus 12 divided by 2, which is 16 divided by 2, which is 8. Or we've got 4 minus 12 divided by 2, which is negative 8 divided by 2, which is negative 4. And so our solution set is going to be 8 or negative 4. Put those in some set brackets there. All right. So there's our solutions. And that's how we use the quadratic formula. Handy formula, a lot of arithmetic, so you got to watch out for your arithmetic errors there, but it's really useful in the end because it gets you straight to the answer if you're careful with your arithmetic.